No one saw it coming. The day was supposed to be lighthearted, a country horse show, muddy boots, paper cups of tea, and children laughing as ponies trotted past. For the royal family, this wasn't one of those stiff ceremonial appearances. It was supposed to be casual, no press briefings, no choreographed handshakes, just Charlotte and her family enjoying the outdoors like anyone else. But what happened that day would ripple far beyond the event itself, shaking the palace from the inside out. Charlotte had been radiant, walking through the fairgrounds in her riding boots, her hair pulled into a neat ponytail. She was charming without trying, waving politely, smiling at strangers, and keeping an eye on the pony show like she genuinely cared who won. For a 9-year-old, she carried herself with surprising maturity, graceful, quiet, and observant. People whispered how much she resembled Diana, not just in looks, but in the way she seemed to see through everything around her. And then came the shift. She'd been standing with Lola Parker, Camilla's granddaughter, when things began to sour. Lola wasn't royalty by blood, but she'd always been around, showing up beside Camilla at public events and family functions. The public never really paid much attention to her, but inside royal circles she was treated with courtesy, close enough to be included, but never really part of the inner circle. That day, Charlotte, being her usual polite self, offered Lola a sip from her juice box. Nothing dramatic, just a kind gesture between kids. She even added a little warning saying she'd need the rest later, but minutes later, when she turned back, the juice box was completely empty, drained. She blinked in confusion, then asked gently, "Wait, did you finish it?" Lola didn't flinch. "Yeah," Charlotte frowned, caught off guard, "but I asked you not to." That's when Lola spoke, not loudly, not in a tantrum, just calm and cutting. "You act like you're in charge of everything, like you're the queen already, just like your mom." Charlotte stood frozen. Lola continued, "And she's not even queen. My grandma is. Your mom's just pretending. Everyone sees it." That might have been enough to sting, but she wasn't done. "You're not special. One day they'll just marry you off. That's all you'll ever be. Someone's wife." Charlotte didn't scream. She didn't argue. She didn't know how to respond to that kind of venom dressed up as conversation. Her hand tightened around the now empty juice box as her eyes welled up. Then she quietly turned, walked straight to her mother, and grabbed Kate's hand like it was the only solid thing in the world. Kate didn't make a scene, she didn't even speak, but her body language shifted completely. She wrapped her arms around Charlotte, knelt to meet her eye level, and held her close, no questions, no fuss. But those standing nearby saw the change in her expression. It was subtle but unmistakable. A royal mask pulled tight, laced with quiet fury. William noticed the shift instantly. He stopped mid-conversation with King Charles and walked toward them. One glance at his daughter's face told him everything he needed to know. There were no tears running down her cheeks, but the look in her eyes had changed. He leaned in, spoke briefly to Kate, then turned to the people nearby. He didn't yell, he didn't raise his voice, but his jaw clenched. His gaze landed on Lola, then the adults around her, then back to Charlotte. And without another word, he simply took his daughter by the hand and walked away. Nobody needed a press release, the air had changed, and behind the smiles, something had broken. A tweet went live, no fanfare, no official crest, just a black background, white text, and the unmistakable voice of a father who'd had enough. "My family will always come first. Anyone who thinks they can harm my daughter and remain close to us is mistaken." That was it. No names, no details, but within minutes, it was clear exactly who he meant. The palace didn't release a statement. They didn't need to. William's words hit like thunder across the royal landscape. Royal watchers were stunned. This wasn't protocol. Princes don't fire off tweets about family feuds, but William wasn't acting like a prince that night. He was acting like a dad. And the internet responded instantly. Hashtags erupted. Team Charlotte trended within an hour. The tweet got picked up by every major outlet, analyzed word by word. People were refreshing timelines, waiting to see if a follow-up would appear. It didn't, because the point had already been made. Then came the aftermath. Within days, something shifted in the royal guest lists. Quietly, without press coverage, Lola Parker's name was missing from an upcoming Windsor Garden event. Camilla arrived alone, no granddaughter in tow. At first, it was brushed off as a scheduling thing, maybe even illness, but then she was absent again from another family gathering and then from a charity appearance she usually attended with Camilla. The pattern became clear. Lola hadn't just been excluded once, she was out. Behind palace doors, there were whispers, not about the incident itself that had been kept surprisingly tight, but about the decision that followed. William had given a quiet instruction to his closest aides: no more access. Lola was no longer welcome at private family events, no more behind-the-scenes passes, no more presence in the royal bubble. It wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. For William, this wasn't about punishing a child, it was about drawing a line between blood and proximity, between those born into the legacy and those who drifted near it. Because what Lola had said wasn't just mean, it revealed something deeper, an entitlement, a kind of access that came without accountability, and that William wouldn't tolerate. The public rallied around him, comments poured in, he did what any father should. You don't mess with a child, royal or not. But of course not everyone agreed. Some called it an overreaction. Others questioned whether a private word would have done the trick. Kids argue, someone posted. It did need to become palace policy, and in the middle of it all, Camilla was furious. She felt blindsided, not just by the removal, but by the silence that followed. No explanation, no conversation, just absence. For someone who had spent decades trying to be seen as part of the family, this felt like a rejection that went deeper than Lola. It was personal. She confronted Charles repeatedly, first gently, then with visible frustration. But Charles offered nothing more than a quiet shrug and a simple phrase, "It's been handled." That silence cut deeper than any public statement. It wasn't just about a family decision, it was about power, about who had it and who didn't anymore. So Camilla turned her attention elsewhere. She started calling in favors with reporters she trusted. Soft stories began to appear about Lola's kindness, her confusion, her shock, gentle narratives meant to soften the blow. But they didn't land the way she hoped, because at the heart of all those headlines was still the image of Charlotte, tears in her eyes, gripping her mother's hand. That picture, unposed and unfiltered, was already burned into the public's mind, and no amount of gentle press could erase it. Tensions inside the palace reached a boiling point. Camilla, once confident in her quiet influence, suddenly found herself isolated. Meetings that used to feel cordial turned stiff. Staff who once nodded warmly gave only polite half smiles. Even Charles, usually the one to smooth over cracks, kept his distance. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. His silence told her everything. The tide had shifted, and she was no longer standing where she used to. But what truly broke her was what came next. According to sources, William sat down with his children one evening, not as a royal, not as a future king, but as a father who'd had enough of blurred lines. With a calm voice and tired eyes, he told them something simple, something final. Camilla is not your grandmother, you already have one. Her name is Deanna. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't explain it like a scandal, he just made it clear. Kindness had its limits, and protecting his children came first. Spoilers for George, Charlotte, and Louis, it was a gentle shift, but for William, it marked something far deeper. A quiet rewrite of royal history. That moment wasn't just about family, it was about legacy, about who would live in their memories, in the photo frames, in the bedtime stories passed down through generations. Camilla's name would be skipped, her place reduced to a footnote. She would remain queen consort on paper, sure, but in William's future monarchy, she'd be absent from what truly mattered. No portraits beside Diana, no stories from grandma, no lasting mark. Behind the scenes, aides started calling it the invisible removal. There were no official changes to her title, no grand gestures, just a soft erasure from the next chapter. The palace walls remained intact, but the energy inside them had changed. Camilla was still present at events, she still smiled smiled for the cameras, but something was gone. People no longer confided in her the way they used to. They were respectful, yes, but distant. She noticed it everywhere. At dinners, where conversations moved past her, in briefings where aides kept things vague, even in Charles, who had grown quieter, more distracted, more focused on the uncertain state of his health than on palace disputes, and the press, they stopped biting. The stories she'd hoped would build sympathy fizzled. Most readers weren't interested in a redemption arc for someone they never fully embraced. They were too busy sharing clips of Charlotte's moment with Kate. Memes, essays, emotional TikToks, the internet had spoken. The public wasn't rallying behind Camilla. They were siding with a child. William didn't gloat. He didn't say, "I told you so." He simply carried on, focused, protective, determined to keep the crown clean for the future he believed in. One where his daughter would grow up knowing her worth. One where his wife would no longer be quietly picked apart. One where Diana's legacy would not be buried under history, but honored, front and center. For Camilla, the reality stung. After years of effort, after building relationships, after trying to wear the role with grace, it all came undone with a juice box and a handful of sharp words. It wasn't about titles. It never really was. It was about respect. And somewhere along the line, she'd lost it. She still walks the halls of the palace. She still wears the crown. But when it comes to the future, when it comes to what will be remembered, her place is no longer carved in stone. William didn't need revenge. He simply made a promise. Never again. And he kept it. Quietly, completely, unshakably.